Well, hello everybody, Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads, and welcome to the first video in our Harry Potter read-along. Today we're starting out with the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone if you're reading the UK version. And I was starting out with chapters 1 and 2. I really had a blast reading this. I forgot how much fun this series really is, and I'm really excited to be going through the whole series again. I also have some notes that I took here, because otherwise I will never remember everything that I wanted to talk about. So in this first chapter, we're introduced to the somewhat boring, normal Dursleys, a rather well-to-do, very status-conscious family living in an English town. Now, I got a strong Hyacinth Bouquet vibe from the beginning pages. For those of you who are not familiar, Hyacinth Bouquet is a character in an old TV show called Keeping Up Appearances. And that's what I got that's what the Dursleys reminded me of as they strive to keep up appearances. I really like the opening pages of this. This sets the tone nicely. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. So the author briefly mentions that Mrs. Dursley has an eccentric sister, Mrs. Potter, whom for years Mr. and Mrs. Dursley have pretended doesn't exist and pretended not to know. So Mr. Dursley is on his way to work one fine morning, and when he notices a cat reading a map. Now, he's a little bit unsettled by this, but then tells himself that he only just imagined it. Then he begins to notice his surroundings a little bit more and takes note of people dressed in brightly colored cloaks, adults nonetheless. So later on that day, he overhears people talking in an excited manner about the Potters and the Potters' one-year-old son, Harry. But again, he tells himself that it has to be a coincidence that there are plenty of Potters in England. So on the way home, he encounters another man in a cloak who seems almost giddy as and actually I think he hugs Mr. Dursley and says that someone named you-know-who has finally gone and that even a muggle like Mr. Dursley should rejoice. So the news is full of unusual reports about shooting stars and hundreds of owls flying during the day. Now, this encounter with the man, this is the first time that we're exposed to the word muggle, which is used several times in the first chapter. Though I don't believe it's ever explained, we can pretty much figure out its meaning from context. So later on that night, we're introduced to Albus Dumbledore, whom we assume is a wizard, given that he just pops in out of nowhere. So the wizard approaches the cat sitting on the fence, who then transforms into a woman whom we later learn is Professor McGonagall, another wizard. So then they discuss the disappearance of Voldemort, who most people only dare refer to as you-know-who, though Dumbledore does refer to him by his real name, and actually I think Professor McGonagall mentioned that he's the only one who dares to refer to you-know-who as Voldemort. So we learned from Dumbledore that Voldemort murdered Lily and James Potter the previous night and tried to kill their son Harry as well, but was unable to do so. Dumbledore adds that Voldemort's power apparently began to break after his failed attempt to kill Harry, and that he retreated. And that's why everyone was talking about you-know-who has gone or disappeared. So right off the bat, we learn that Voldemort is an extremely dangerous person, and that he's killed many people. In fact, McGonagall says on page 12, "It's true," faltered Professor McGonagall. "After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astounding, of all the things to stop him. But how in the name of heaven did Harry survive?" Thus, Voldemort's inability to kill a child suggests to us that Harry is indeed an important little boy, and a special little boy. Dumbledore adds that the baby Harry is to be left on the doorstep of his uncle and aunt, the Dursleys, despite McGonagall's protestations. But Dumbledore insists that there is no one else to take care of the child except for his blood relatives, and suggests that it's best that he be brought up in a place where nobody knows who he is or what has happened to him, until that time when Harry is old enough to be told of his fate. So we get the idea here that what happened to Harry is of the utmost importance to the world, and it was mentioned in this first chapter that people all over tonight will be toasting to the boy who lived. So though we don't know as of yet Harry's importance, we do understand that he is or he will be important in the future. So we next meet the giant Hagrid, who falls out of the sky on a ginormous motorcycle. So he was the one who was entrusted with delivering baby Harry to number 4 Privet Drive. So Dumbledore then takes Harry and places him on the Dursleys' doorstep with an explanatory letter he has written to them, and the three of them disappear. Okay, so now, Chapter 2. Fast forward 10 years. Harry is now almost 11 years old, and he's living in horrible conditions with the Dursleys, his aunt and uncle, relegated to a spider-filled cupboard underneath the stairs of the Dursley house, with plenty of skipped meals and rags for clothes. He even has to wear broken eyeglasses. Now, what struck me with this chapter was that Rowling makes the Dursleys into kind of a snidely whiplash characters, exaggerated villains with no redeeming qualities. I mean, we're talking really over-the-top nasty here. It's hard to even think of them as real people. They're more like caricatures than anything else. Now, I remember reading somewhere that this was because Rowling wanted to convey the feeling of a fairy tale, a story of myth. You know, so much like the wicked stepmother or the evil queen are archetypes, so kind of are the Dursleys in the opening of this book. So Harry is also tormented by Dursley's horrible son, Dudley, a spoiled and whiny brat. I think the name Dudley kind of suits him because the name makes you even think of a dud. Harry says that Dudley looks like a pig in a wig, which gave me a chuckle. So we learned from Aunt Petunia, which is Mrs. Dursley, that today is Dudley's birthday. And we really get an idea of how spoiled Dudley really is during the scene when he's opening his presents and throws a hissy fit because he only has 36 presents, 2 fewer than the previous year. And they weren't minor presents either. His haul included a racing bike, a video camera, a remote control airplane, 16 computer games, a gold wristwatch, and a VCR. But in order to help calm him down from his tantrum, his parents probably promised to get him 2 more gifts to make it 38, more than last year. So this is yet another example of the over-the-top exaggeration where Harry's family is concerned, the Dursleys, where Dudley gets 38 very expensive presents. I mean, really, who does that? So then, then when the babysitter calls to say that she will not be able to watch Harry for the day, I believe she had broken her leg, Dudley pitches yet another fit because he's upset that Harry has to be brought along on Dudley's birthday trip to the zoo. So at the zoo is where things start to get interesting. So they're at the zoo, and then they head over to the reptile house, where Harry pays special attention to a huge boa constrictor and is astonished when not only does the snake wink at Harry, Harry is then able to carry on a conversation with it. So noticing what Harry is doing, or curious as to what Harry is doing, Dudley's friend calls over Mr. Dursley and Dudley, and they both push Harry aside to get a better look at the snake. Now at this moment, the glass in front of the snake's tank vanishes, which means there is no barrier between the people and the snake. And the boa constrictor then slithers out on the floor, telling Harry that he's now on his way to Brazil. So the Dursleys are in shock, and at home, Harry is subsequently punished for the snake incident, and he is sent to his cupboard without any food, though Harry feels that he had nothing to do with what happened. Now, we also learn in this chapter that this is not the first time strange events have occurred in Harry's presence. Now, what I find interesting is that even at this very early age, Harry is already doing magic without even realizing it. We learned that one time he suddenly found himself unexpectedly on top of a roof of a house, figuring that just a gust of wind pulled him up. Or another one was his hair growing back the next day after having his head nearly shaved the previous day. Or sweaters shrinking to hand puppet size right before their eyes. And now there is the ability of having the conversation with a boa constrictor, only then to have the pane of glass separating them disappear. Now, at this point in the story, Harry has no idea that it's his own magic causing these events, though, judging by his hostile reaction, Uncle Vernon is, or at least suspects that Harry is at the bottom of it. So that pretty much sums it up, I think, for the first two chapters of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So what about you? What jumped out for you in these two chapters? Was there anything that you especially liked? Anything that you especially disliked? Any interesting symbology that you noticed? So next week we will continue. But let's try bumping up our reading to 3 chapters instead of 2, because these are a pretty fast read. So for next Sunday, we'll be discussing chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So, and also, I also want to ask that, feel free to discuss the chapters in the comments, but try not to add in any spoilers, just in case if there are people who are going through this book for the first time. And so we don't want to ruin anybody's experience. So let's limit the discussion just to these first 2 chapters this time. And that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of our adventure with Harry Potter. And I will talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.